Oh, Queen Justice, where are you? Did they beat you up or no? Lock you on the ground, take the crown away from you? Oh, Lady Liberty,
Sheldon, if you want, you can go ahead and start.
white and blue. Did they take your dignity with their bigotry? Teach you that you're born to lose. Free or guilty, it's gonna get filthy. Better believe, roll up your sleeves. It's gonna get rough, it's gonna be tough. We all agree, we've had enough. We've had enough of all the rules you break. We've had enough of all the money you make. We've had enough, no more life at stake. We've had enough, this is a proclamation. It's been 400 years and we're 400 late. Together we stand from state to state. Going back in time won't make America great. We need justice now, people won't wait. Action, no more distraction. Every step we take, we gain traction. If it can happen to one, it can happen to all. United we stand, divided we fall. Free or guilty, it's gonna get filthy. Better believe, roll up your sleeves. It's gonna get rough, it's gonna be tough. We all agree, we've had enough. We've had enough of all the rules you were breaking. We had enough of all the money you were making. We had enough, no more life gets taken. We had enough, this is a proclamation. Free or guilty, it's gonna get filthy. Better believe, just roll up your sleeves. It's gonna get rough, it's gonna be tough. We all agree, we've had enough. We've had enough of all the rules you're breaking. We've had enough, all the money you're making. We've had enough, no more life gets taken. We've had enough, this is the proclamation. We've had enough. Trayvon Martin and Tommy Rice. We've had enough. Michael Brown and Eric gonna pay the price. We've had enough. Philando, Breonna, George Floyd. What? We've had enough. So many gone. How can we fill the void? How can we fill We've had enough. Void? John Crawford, I know you've heard. We've had enough. Sandra Bland, come on and take a stand. We've had enough. Sean Bell, what the hell? We've had enough. Freddie Gray, did you hear what I said? We've had enough. This is a proclamation.
Mr. Mack, you're live now.
Great. Okay. I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane. Apologies for the technical challenges getting started, but as always, we plan to deliver a wonderful and rich program today. I want to thank my guests today online right now are Professor Brunel Powell, Dean Brunel Powell, Dean Emeritus of the University of South Carolina Law School, and Kamal King, retired corporate counsel for Coca-Cola Company in Atlanta. Brothers, thank you both for being here. We'll be joined by our third friend and partner, Clinton Collins, corporate counsel for Geico Corporation here in Twin Cities momentarily. We also have on the call today Angela Conley, who is a commissioner for Hennepin County. Hennepin County, interestingly, is home for both Minneapolis, the major city, largest city in the county, I think it's largest, but also for Brooklyn Center. And the connection is obvious. The George Floyd murder in South Minneapolis and the Daunte Wright killing in Brooklyn Center recently both brought massive local and international attention to our community. Well, Angela Conley represents the neighborhood that the George Floyd murder took place in, and Angela actually represents that body of government in Hennepin County where the trial was held. Angela, first of all, thank you for being here. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane. I want to begin with you, and after we talk, I'm going to ask my other guests to weigh in on impressions about the trial, the Derek Chauvin trial, both the verdict and what's next. And there is talk about appeals based on some of the action or voicings of one of the jurors who's gone public. But I also want to talk about in the next few minutes with my legal team and after my interview with you, Angela, things like the upcoming trial for the killing of Mr. Wright, Dante Wright in Brooklyn Center. And hopefully today we'll talk about things on a national level, a little different. I'm curious about what's happening with Rudy Giuliani and with the former Attorney General, Mr. Barr. And so these and more things on today's program. But first, welcome, Angela Conley. How are you? Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This is really an honor. I'm doing pretty good today. I'm glad I can finally be here. This is
We've been trying for a while.
It is incredible. So thank you so much. I appreciate being here and being a part of this discussion is really, really important to me. So thank you.
Well, let me start by asking you to lay out, the realm that you serve and lead as a commissioner of Hennepin County. And I'm asking you to do this in the context of providing our listeners and viewers locally, but also those who are monitoring our program nationally. We are streaming live through the website, the Facebook page of the Black Press of America, the National Newspaper Publishers Association. So people are extremely interested in Minnesota, in the issues we've talked about, and I want to give you a chance to put things in context, about what is Hennepin County and what the role is of the county in serving the residents, number one, but how.
You cut out on me, but can others still hear? I hope so.
Yes.
Okay. I'll get started with kind of just an overview of Hennepin County in general and how and kind of how we relate to other jurisdictions, other levels of government. So Hennepin County is the largest county in the state of Minnesota. It's probably the 32nd largest county in the country. And we operate about a $2.2 billion budget. And that's everything from, your streets to health and human services and how those are allocated, how we respond to people in crisis. We encompass the county attorney's office, the sheriff's office, and we also do work around homelessness and housing. And we're a conduit financer through the Housing and Redevelopment Authority. So the Hennepin County Board, it's 7 people that are responsible for the well-being, that have a huge responsibility in the well-being for 1.2 million people who live in Hennepin County. And so this is the second largest level of government next to state government. And it's really important that we have good partnerships with other levels of government, with other jurisdictions. So being in good relationships with your park boards and your city councils, state legislature, all those are really important for this work to get done and for it to be successful. And so within Hennepin County and within my district is the city of Minneapolis, largest city. And it's been quite the 2 years and 2.5 years that I've been a county commissioner in how the world has changed, how Minneapolis has changed, how the county has changed, and how we have just a lot of catching up to do as a government body. In all ways. So in the way that we craft and sustain relationships and the way that we invest in people and the way that we react and respond to disparities in Hennepin County. And so that's some really important work that I have been involved in. But also just on a personal level, yes, we looked at a global phenomenon, a global uprising that happened just a few blocks from my house. So 38th in Chicago is right outside of my front door. I can hear it. I can see it. I spent a lot of time there last summer, being with community. And so we've learned a lot. There's been a lot of lessons learned over the last 12 months about what change looks like at the county level, and what investing into communities really means for us. It allows us to think differently than we had in the past. And when I got to the board, myself and Commissioner Fernando, there had never been a presence of a Black or brown person on the Hennepin County board before 2019 when we were sworn in. And so there's a lot of pressure, and there's a lot of pushing that we can do. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity now that these voices are there to shift how the county reacts to our communities.
I think we lost Al. So Burnell.
I saw that.
Well, I'm wondering, in terms of the number of things that you have to deal with, that seems like a huge plate, number one. But with you, are you the only person of color who's a member of the commission?
Yeah, so that, thank you for that question, because it is a lot. And over the last 20 years prior to running for office, I had worked in state and county government. And so for 20 years, I was working on the inside. I knew a lot about how county decisions, state decisions translate into what shows up on people's front doors, what shows up in community, and how that works from the inside. And so when I ran for the seat, I realized that we had never had, our voices. There had never been a Black person, a person of color elected to the county board before 2019. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, I am the first Black Hennepin County Commissioner, and we have two in the state with my colleague Chair and Commissioner Tony Carter in Ramsey County. And so this is groundbreaking. It's important to have leadership and responsible for so much. You're right, the bag is very heavy, and to not have had our voices there means that there's a lot of catching up to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, you and I have a little something in common. I'm in South Carolina, and South Carolina is a state that has been made famous by Nikki Haley's saying that it's a sunny day in South Carolina, and basically that is an attitude that everything is really nice here, and it's a beautiful time to be in South Carolina, and we're all warm and fuzzy. And it reminds me a bit of the notion of Minnesota nice. And I've seen a couple of articles recently that have said, well, everything is nice in Minnesota, except if you're a person of color. And I think in South Carolina, everything is beautiful, except if you're a person of color. You may see that all that shines is not gold. What's your take on all of this?
I think that is a really, really good comparison. We've got the best parks in the country here, and yet not if you're a person of color, right? I mean, Minnesota and Hennepin County, the city of Minneapolis, we lead the nation in certain areas, right? But it's not equable. We win awards for our park systems. We win awards for livability, and people talk about the best places to live. But I'm really, really concerned with the fact that we're also leading the nation in the worst places to live for Black people and people of color. And Hennepin County, I mean, you can zoom right in and see where these disparities lie. And overwhelmingly, that's right here in our neighborhoods, North Side, South Side, the Brooklyn Park, Brooklyn Center, Richfield. These disparities pop up everywhere, and everywhere that they pop up, from home ownership to access to rent you can afford, everywhere they show up, Hennepin County can do something. can partner with someone about it, whether it's partnering with, we're in a briefing earlier talking about ways that we can change how we show up for the educational system in terms of like technological support, things like that. So absolutely, I think that Hennepin County has a huge role to play in the disparities that exist, because it's something that we just don't talk about because of Minnesota Nice, right?
Question: what's the Black population of the county?
We've got a 40% people of color population. So Hennepin County in and of itself, of that 1.2 million, 40% identify as people of color. Now, specifically for Black folks, I want to say that that's 20%, but I don't quote me on that. But the 40% it's been about 40% for a couple of years now.
Is the county commission composed of districts, or is the voting at large?
It's districts. So we've got 7 commissioner districts throughout Hennepin County. I represent the 4th district, which is, I'm the one district that's bound by Minneapolis. So I have just the city of Minneapolis in my district. But with the other 6 districts, there's a combination of city and suburb. There's a combination of, they're all suburb. And then, in the western part of the county, you get to more land versus people. So that's a larger piece of the county. But for larger counties, we are broken up into 7. Between the state of Minnesota, it's between 5 and 7 county commissioners, depending upon the population of the county. So because our county is so big, we have seven decision makers on the board.
Okay, so it sounds like you should have maybe two people of color.
Yeah, myself and Commissioner Irene Fernando, who represents District 2. We honored her yesterday for acknowledging our Asian and Pacific Islander family. Commissioner Fernando was elected when I was, and we were sworn in together, and both we brightened up the board with what the perspectives that we were bringing, and just the historic nature of what this meant for Hennepin County leadership.
Okay.
Well, we still have not been rejoined by
I think I see him coming.
He's trying to zoom in. One of the other issues he wanted to talk about was the trial and the reverberations therefrom. I know that there's an appeal going on. I heard briefly on the news earlier this week that one of the issues on appeal is a fellow who was on the jury who was seen with a Black Lives Matter T-shirt on.
Yeah,
I didn't see that as sufficient for an appeal.
Well, he was at a rally in D.C. It was a celebration of the Martin Luther King's March on Washington, and he was wearing the shirt that said Black Lives Matter. What the defense is claiming is that he was asked whether he had participated in any demonstrations on behalf of Black Lives Matter. And he said that he had not. And the question, of course, is, well, if he was at a demonstration wearing a T-shirt that said Black Lives Matter, and the T-shirt not only said Black Lives Matter, but it's I think that the rally was billed as the get your knee off of my neck rally by some, and that slogan was also on the T-shirt. So from an optical standpoint, there's at least an argument to be made, but I would think that argument is not going very far. In order to find that there's been jury misconduct, one has to be able to make rather specific claims, and simply a general statement that he supported Black Lives Matter is not going to do it, particularly since during the voir dire, when he was questioned, he was asked specifically on one of the written questions
whether he supported Black Lives Matter, and he said, yes, I do. So they knew that he was a supporter of Black Lives Matter.
Okay.
And so that, that in and of itself can't be a reason for finding that there was jury misconduct.
Right.
But it is what I would expect defense counsel to do in these matters.
Exactly. Now, the politics of this trial and the way it has impacted Minneapolis and Hennepin County, my thoughts are that they want to get this behind them. I would think that the county and the officials want to get this behind them, and that in order to for a judge to declare a mistrial and want a new trial, I would think they would have a high bar to climb.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm back. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Listen, apologies. Boy, technology is amazing. So I've changed spaces, and I'm hearing myself in an echo because I'm listening both through my headsets here and watching it on two devices. Are you getting an echo with me or not?
No.
Just one. Okay. Great. Well, thank you. I've enjoyed the conversation. This is wonderful. Thank you so much. Let me jump back in, though. And Angela, and I'm not sure how much time you have, but I wanted to give people a sense of how you feel our community is dealing with the pressure that comes from the global spotlight around George Floyd and around Brother Dante Wright. That, coupled by the pressure that the whole world is experiencing right now with COVID-19, and the fear that our communities, Black and brown communities, are being either by choice or by accident, but underserved and overrepresented in cases and in deaths, etc. And so how does all of this create an environment in which our community feels safe and sees its way towards restoration and towards health? And what's the money? How much of the federal money and the state money is going to be delivered to solutions that originate in our community?
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot.
That is a lot, but it's these are really good questions, and I wanted to kind of piggyback on that conversation around community, because community has been really resilient over the last my neighbors, right, and people who have emailed my office and people who have asked to talk about what has been happening, throughout the area, throughout the city, and this overwhelming feeling of heaviness and pressure from, you've got people that are trying to stay in their homes because there's a pandemic, and you have people who still are looking for work. And then you add on top of that, the murder that everyone saw that really sparked different conversations happen right in your own backyard. And then you've got some really good people that have been holding space at 38th in Chicago, and you have neighbors that are experiencing challenges living around the area. And I think all of those things need to be highlighted, and especially a call for government leadership, for elected leadership, to really rally around community in the ways that I've seen them show up for each other, for themselves and for each other. We've seen people that got to know their neighbors through block clubs and guarding their own blocks. We saw people overwhelmingly provide mutual aid to each other, and still do, because at the time we were also facing a huge crisis of unsheltered homelessness last summer. And so there was just compounded trauma, on the south side, on the north side, all over the city, right? And I could feel it very heavy myself, being, the county commissioner for the area, and relying on my friends at the city to get information out to people, to survey folks about how they feel in terms of, what's happening around the intersection. And also, how are we investing in mental health supports and expanding those? One thing that I was really happy to do, Hennepin County contracts with Kente Circle, who does a really good job at supporting our communities. Mental health, Black-led, right? And trying to look at ways that those services could be expanded, especially to our folks out in Brooklyn Center. And so I think that really strategic investments. So when we're talking about dollars, right, we used a lot of the county, I mentioned $2.2 billion, right? Mm-hmm. That's our budget. But we did receive CARES funding from the federal government last year in response to the pandemic. And a lot of that was used for keeping, renters assistance, small business assistance. Mm-hmm. And part of that was even fighting for some of that small business assistance to, be flexible so that businesses that weren't just affected by COVID, but also affected by the uprisings on Lake Street, for example, could have supports to get rebuilt too, right? To get rebuilt. And so a lot of those dollars that came from the federal government went to just that. And then we're seeing now that funding shift to vaccinations and what we're seeing is that the issues that arose last year and the issues that have always kind of just been prevalent are getting worse and require significant investment. And so one of the things that I've been hearing from community members around 38th in Chicago is, what are the ways that you're going to invest into our community that makes sense, that promotes entrepreneurship, that promotes entrepreneurship for Black-owned businesses, for Indigenous-owned businesses in the community, to bring to 38th Street an investment that builds off of what community has already done there, organizationally, just as neighbors, ideas. I got to shout out the council vice president for the city of Minneapolis, Andrea Jenkins, who has crafted the 38th Street Thrive Plan. And I think that makes sense in terms of getting resources into the area that people are really asking for, and not forgetting that we are memorializing the space. Neighbors feel like there is a space here that needs to be memorialized due to the fact that it reached everyone around the world. And so those conversations are happening. And I think that prioritizing investments into our community that have gone missed is exactly what we should be thinking about right now as people try to recover.
What you think about focusing on the relationships between corporations and community. In Atlanta, I think a lot of pressure on major corporations around supporting positions about voting or access to voting and legislation. The same discussions are being held here. And I think that from within the community, there are voices that want to examine and create a different kind of accountability between the corporate and business leadership and the community. The community wants to define itself differently, not simply as consumer, but as a co-creator of community. What do you think about that? And would you gentlemen weigh in as well? This walk towards redefining the relationship between community and capital, community and business, where can it lead? What are the dangers? But Angela?
I mean, I think there's a conversation that I'm pushing right now about trust. And I bring up trust a lot because there's parallels with the private sector and the public sector in terms of how community members view us, how Black folks view us, different corporations, government entities. And the common theme is that there's not a lot of trust there. And I think that we've got some work to do to rebuild that trust. But I've always thought about the fact that when we talk about Hennepin County on a broader sphere, so commissioners, et cetera, when we talk to the National Association of Counties or other levels of government, we talk about, how economically viable, we want to be, and how we want to push and pressure to get specific things done within community, right? And I think that and we talk about, we've got all of these, Fortune 500 companies here in Hennepin County, and how can we utilize that and leverage that? And when it comes to partnering for community, I've seen some examples of that. So someone like Alina and the Hope Youth Program out of South Minneapolis, them sharing space around supporting youth who are in distance learning. I think that was a great partnership, but there can be more, right? Especially with the number of corporations that we have here and how they show up in our communities.
And what do you gentlemen think, Professor Powell?
Commissioner, when I hear you talk about trust and hope, and you lay out the agenda for working together and looking forward to the future, I want to be optimistic. But there is something that reminds me that since the 60s and under Lyndon Johnson and the Great Society, this country has been engaged in disinvesting in everything. It's been trying not to invest in the major issues that have hit us today. The pandemic is a result of our decision. When I say our, I'm speaking specifically of the Trump administration's decision not to put money into the Center for Disease Control and educational institutions to study the effects of the pandemic and to prepare for them. The problems that we're having with our reckoning on race and our reckoning with respect to voting, those are problems that have arisen because relentlessly over the last 4 years and more subtly over the 20 years before that, the Republican Party has been working to divide the country and simply to say to the country, you don't really need to worry. We're going to protect you from the other, and the other happens to be, largely made up of people of color, blacks specifically, and young people. So it strikes me that what we are grappling with is a circumstance in which one of the major concerns is going to be the question of if we actually are able to make strides in areas of race, economic disparities, to reverse this disinvestment in the country, are we going to be able to protect ourselves from the backlash which is going to come? That all of this was being done at the expense of the white majority who built this nation. That's what we heard after the Great Society. Are you comfortable that we're not going to hear it after this effort?
No, I think we'll hear it. I believe that we're going to hear it. But as I've said before, I believe that the arc of the moral universe bends toward justice. And I believe that with technology being what it is today, the issues are really being clarified. People are going to have to make a choice. I think that the 2022 elections are going to be a bellwether as to whether or not the country is willing to move forward, or as I just heard McConnell say today, that he's fighting to oppose everything that Biden is trying to do. Yeah. I believe that as far as the corporations go, I think that they are going to make decisions that are in the best interest of their bottom line. And best interest includes peace and tranquility, not a lot of uproar. The Coca-Cola Company, Delta, Home Depot, they all made statements here with regard to the voting. And believe me, from being in corporate America for 30 years, 33 years actually, I know that that's not something that they want to do. That's not something that they would want to do. But now they understand how it's impacting their bottom line. and you have the push of the activists, and not only Black activists, but you have push of people of moral character watching, and it's not just a Black thing, it's right versus wrong. It's fairness versus greed. So I feel as though it's going to be a continual battle as long as we live, because it's been a continual battle as long as America has been. I think it's going to be a continual battle to protect our interests. And I think that our interests are being joined now by more than just us. And the world is watching.
If I may, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the ways in which these institutions have just kept perpetuating this. So, Mr. Powell, you mentioned, the county, and we've got centuries. I mean, it was 2019 before anyone who looked like us was sworn into that board. Local elections are really, really important because of that. So that was just a couple of years ago, and this is an institution that controls our correction system. This is an institution, the county, right, that encompasses the courts. It encompasses child protection, and it encompasses all of these things that have historically been the bane of Black people's existence, right? And so we have to acknowledge that and say, as an institution, this is how we failed. And other institutions, right, corporate institutions, have reckoning to do too. You mentioned reckoning, right? And how has Wells Fargo, for example, or other institutions profited off of our oppression, and are still reaping benefits today? And there's a lot of, research that's gone on, and there's a lot of companies now that are actually issuing apologies because of slavery, things like that. So these are things that are just happening recently. This reckoning, this global awakening, like literally was last summer. I think there is definitely a long way to go. I think there is definitely a long road ahead. It's been a long road.
Yet, while much of the country is focused on the efforts to move forward that you and Kamal speak to, there's another half of the country who still believes that Donald Trump won the election, and that he's the legitimate president of the United States. And they're in the process of throwing out of the party, for all practical purposes, the third ranking Republican leader in the country, because she will not accept the idea that the big lie is a big lie and it should not be tolerated. Can we be optimistic in a world where our brothers and sisters, our neighbors in our communities, our neighbors nationwide, are still headed in the wrong direction?
Let me have you come back to that in a second, Dean Powell. And I want to focus a bit on where this discussion has specific energy right now in Hennepin County, in Minneapolis. Part of the consequence of the George Floyd insurrection is the call for defunding or abolishing the police. In one of my shows, I interviewed a candidate for city council who declared that she is an abolitionist. I'd never heard that term spoken in modern language and community, but she declared that she is an abolitionist, and she meant exactly abolishing the policing system as it exists. When we talked to her, it didn't come off that way. She was leaning towards, how do we grow the system out of just the realm of the city of Minneapolis and look at a larger authority? She was pointing at Hennepin County as a level of both criminal justice, courts, law enforcement, peacekeeping that would be a way to shift the mission and the character of the work away from what many perceive as oppressive management of our misery of crime and of the potential of crime, the perception that crime will occur because the people are in that neighborhood. But move away from that to the deploying of mental health resources, social service resources, engaging, employing the people, the community more broadly, differently, in supporting each other in health, safety, access, and growth. What do you think?
So yeah, and I wanna keep it county for a second, right? Because the dynamics within Hennepin County government is different in that we have a 7-member body elected board, right? And then you have an elected sheriff. And so a lot of the conversations that have come out about what can we reimagine with public safety for Hennepin County is going to need to be led by the elected sheriff, right? So I think that council person you interviewed could really should reach out to talk to Sheriff Hutchinson and grab his ideas on that. But this is something that we've been thinking about, are ways in which we can expand what community services look like in the sheriff's department, and what does that mean? And then when we think about public safety and the future conversations of public safety, I'm paying really close attention to the conversations coming out of the city council races. I'm listening to the various different candidates. I'm listening and paying very close attention to the conversations that are coming out of Minneapolis leadership just in general and how things are going. Now, in terms of the relationship with our sheriff's department, you know, just recently, myself and recently there was a resolution in front of the board to denounce the use of chemical irritants, to denounce the use of less than lethal projectiles, saying, you know, it was clearly a state, and I supported it. It was clearly a statement saying we denounce these practices because what they do, and the research that's coming out about how they affect maternal health, etc., and people can also get maimed. It was not approved by the overall county board. It didn't get the votes that it needed, but it was a strong message to, you know, our law enforcement that if, you know, being involved in this is not cool, it does harm to people. And at the same time, those dynamics with that person being an elected official is responsible to, you know, his constituents just like we are. And so that's something that I think would be a political will thing, is how do you want to shift and change the sheriff's department so that it reflects better investment or more investment into things like mental health resources right in community. I think, as always, a budget is a statement of our priorities. So what budget are you going to bring that shows that that's a priority?
Great, thank you. So Bernell, let me shift back to your question, your comment, and sort of move the conversation to the national level in the final 15 minutes here. We talked before the program about what's happening with the former Attorney General, Mr. Barr. And in the news today, the fate of Rudy Giuliani seems to be in focus again. What does that conversation mean for the country? What are the issues? And the last thing that I wanted you and Kamal King to talk about is the discussion in Kentucky about the 3/5 of a human being, or 3/5 rule in the Constitution that gave power to landowners, slaveholders in the South, and the Kentucky legislator saying it was a strategy to end slavery. What are your thoughts?
Well, let me say a word about Giuliani first, and then turn to Barr. The Giuliani situation is, I think, something that everybody ought to be focusing on, because of what we saw last week was a raid conducted by the FBI on behalf of the Southern District of New York. The Southern District of New York is known as a tough prosecuting body, and they specialize in white collar and organized crime type prosecutions. In fact, that's how Giuliani made his name. They also pride themselves in terms of their independence. They are not only the Southern District of New York, but they are popularly known as the Sovereign District of New York. And so when you have that group of prosecutors going after you, you really have to be wary. What Giuliani has apparently, what he is up against is a possible charge that he violated the Foreign Registration Act, which basically requires that if you are working on behalf of a foreign government, you have to disclose that. And you have to make certain financial disclosures in connection with the work that you are doing. And what we know is that his office and his home were raided. And we also know that you cannot, the likelihood of being allowed to raid the office of a lawyer is very, very low. You are not going to be able to raid the office of a lawyer or the home of a lawyer, and in this instance, they raided both, without a showing that you have very good reason for doing so. And the reason we don't do it is, pretty obvious. Those lawyers are in control of, in possession of information that belongs to their clients and that relates to confidential communications between them and their clients. So it's just not done. And in this instance, we have a raid on Giuliani, a lawyer, but not only a lawyer, but the lawyer to the President of the United States in addition. And so you know that that is not going to be a hill that you want to climb if you can avoid it. But yet, the Justice Department went to court and asked for the subpoena, and the subpoena was granted. And the standard for the granting of that subpoena is that you've got to, first of all, establish that you have probable cause to believe that there was a crime committed, and secondly, that the place that you want to search is a place where you reasonably expect that evidence related to those crimes can be found. And so note what we have said then. We have said that we've got a very high bar that's got to be met, that there are all kinds of sensitive political considerations that have to be weighed, that it has to go to the highest echelons of the Justice Department. Then it has to go into a court and get an independent examination. And yet all of those things were done, and they raided Giuliani's home and his office. And they got his cell phone and they got his computers. And one of the things that we know about prosecutions of this type is that you don't go after the cell phones and the computers until you know that you've already got them. That you go after the cell phones and the computers in order to polish the case, to fill in the last details. And so Rudy Giuliani is in, I don't know what the legal technical term is, but we'll say deep at this point. What that also means is that Giuliani is going to have to look to somebody to make a deal if he's going to get out of this. And the basic rule with respect to making a deal with the federal government is you can make a deal if you provide evidence on someone who's higher than you. Mm-hmm. There's nobody higher than Giuliani except Donald J. Trump. And so we ought to, the entire nation ought to be focused on that prosecution in terms of where it's going. Secondly, and I'll be brief about this, with respect to the Attorney General. Attorney General Barr is being castigated now by a district court judge, and the judge has essentially said that he's been disingenuous. He's not been fully forthcoming with respect to evidence that was being sought. He has sought to keep a record private that the judge said was not a record that was established during the course of consulting and deliberating about a decision. That the record was made after the decision had already been made, and that Barr represented to the court that the facts were otherwise. And so that suggests that with respect to Barr, the highest thing that he might be concerned with at this point is that he may be looking at perjury or obstruction of justice down the way. I don't think that we're there yet. I think that if Giuliani is at an 8, Barr is probably at a 1 or 2 at this point. But the other thing with respect to Barr and with respect to Giuliani is that they both have to be aware that the standards for lawyer conduct in every jurisdiction in the country include a provision that says that a lawyer may not engage in fraudulent, misleading conduct, and that the lawyer has a responsibility of truthfulness. And so both of them are in a position now where their bars ought to be looking at their conduct. And when a judge goes on record as saying that you've been disingenuous, you've not been forthcoming, says everything other than you lied to us, the disciplinary body ought to be convening, undertaking an examination, an investigation of this matter, and looking towards imposing some sort of sanction on him. And I would add one other point: the sanction, whatever the sanctions are that go against Barr, ought to be examined with relation to the lawyers who assisted Barr in addition.
With regard to the 3/5, I guess the word is disingenuous. Again, the 3/5 clause was put in so that slaves could be counted in the populations of the southern states, even though slaves couldn't vote. Mm-hmm. You know, they could be counted so that you could get more representation because of the people who were literally under your jurisdiction, but those people could not vote. So to say that it was a helping stone to end slavery is just an outright lie. I'm not going to use the word disingenuous. It was just an outright lie.
Yes, and it is curious that we now have an initiative by Republicans, well, several initiatives by Republicans throughout the country to put limits on the way in which we teach history, or at least to defund institutions that are not teaching the right kind of history. And the right kind of history, of course, would be the kind of history that says that the 3/5 rule was a compromise that was arrived at in order to bring about an end to slavery. It's utter nonsense. It's wrong on every level, and there's nothing to be said positively about such a statement other than that, fortunately, most people laughed about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And frankly, it doesn't surprise me that the statement was made. I mean, I want people to pay attention to these things for many reasons, but also because this gives a very glaring view of how people think. And these are people with extraordinary amounts of power who set laws, who set policies. And these are people who have been holding on to these positions for centuries. And so this thinking gets recycled through those families, and this is how we continue to hear them today. It's pretty much a blatant lie, but this is
how we are able to witness what we witnessed following the president's address this last week, when Tim Scott, the only Black Republican in leadership, and I'm not sure if he's the only Black who is a Republican in the Congress right now. I remember there was a Black woman, but she's no longer there. I think her name was Love. So he may be. But he said in his response to President Biden that President Biden was dividing the country and that what the Republicans are trying to do is to bring the country together to work harmoniously. So I think that at least Tim Scott is willing to use all of the language, the positive language that we were using earlier. And the question is, what's going to come out in the mix?
Yeah, it's amazing to me. I watched the movie Django, and my wife gets on me about watching the movie Django. But one of my favorite characters in Django is the character played by Samuel L. Jackson, Stephen. He was the Black who was next to who had his end with the slave master, with the owner of the house. And when you mentioned Tim Scott, I think of people like Stephen, and we've always had those people since the beginning. When we get here, we've always had those Stephens who had more, who served the master. In Georgia, there's a fellow by the name of Vernon Jones, who was a state representative. Now he's moved over to the Republican Party, and he's going to run for governor. And last night, he was interviewed. He said that when he runs for governor, the first thing he's going to do is outlaw any of these teachings on racial, the stuff that we talk about, racial animosity. What's the name for it?
Critical legal studies.
Yeah, in race. Yeah, he's going to outlaw that. And the person who was interviewing him said, "Well, what portions of that critical legal studies are you opposed to?" And he couldn't enunciate any of them. So he just attacked the interviewer. So, we've always had people like that. And I think that there are going to always be people like that. And we just have to be ready. We just have to be ready for them. And a Black skin doesn't mean that you have Black interests at heart.
If history is any indication, if you haven't seen Judas and the Black Messiah, we all know that in our movements, in our spaces, there have been our own that have infiltrated us, right?
Yeah.
And tried to throw wrenches into the good work that good organizers have been trying to do for a very long time.
Well, it's a beautiful day in South Carolina.
Listen, I'm back again. Can you all hear me now?
Yes.
Welcome back.
So, listen, this has been a wonderful conversation. My apologies for the technology challenges, but all to the good, because it facilitated a wonderful exchange between the three of you. So I'm confident that we have all gained, and that our listeners and viewers are gaining from rich, unscripted conversation about important critical issues. And what's most important to me is that we bring a wealth of experience, of knowledge, a feeling of intuition, and legacies to our examination of issues and ideas, and that is important. I want to thank you all. Thank you, my cousin, Professor Dean Burnell Venable Powell, joining us from South Carolina. Thank you, my friend, Kamal J. King, Attorney King, joining us from Atlanta. And thank you, Commissioner Angela Conley. Thank you for your service, your leadership, your work, and the energy, the verve, the fearlessness you bring to your work. I've heard you described as fierce, and I think that's an apt description. Keep up the good work, keep fighting. And I think it's important that you and I work together back to back to ensure that our community gets the information, gets the knowledge. And at the same time, I'll continue to play my role as a journalist, criticizing you and others, as I should. And Absolutely. You should also hold the press accountable as well. So thank you so very much. Thank you to everyone. I'm Al McFarlane. We'll see you next time.